My name is Nadia Wambura, and I come from Nairobi, Kenya, though a great portion of my adult years were spent in Mombasa, along the coast. For 12 years I held senior rank inside a witchcraft coven, whose operations stretched across coastal and East African territory. My specific assignment was to study and track the prayer habits of believers, to locate the moments when those prayers were most exposed to interference. I was exceptionally skilled at this work. I knew exactly when to move against someone, when to introduce confusion, when to plant seeds of doubt, and when to release our most powerful demonic forces to block prayers from ascending into the sacred realm. But there were 3 specific hours within each day that filled every one of us with genuine dread. 3 windows of time when, no matter how formidable our ranks were, no matter what rituals we performed or what sacrifices we offered, we could not stop the prayers of those who prayed within those hours. Today I am going to reveal those 3 times to you. These are not arbitrary windows pulled from thin air. They are not mere suggestions or loosely held traditions. They are spiritually charged seasons of the day that carry such extraordinary divine backing, such commanding celestial authority, that when believers approach them with focused faith and intentional purpose, their prayers function like precision weapons in the unseen realm, weapons that dismantle every demonic assignment laid against their lives. And before I reveal what those 3 times are, I need you to understand one foundational truth. In the spirit realm, timing governs everything. Just as in the natural world there are moments when certain actions carry greater force, so too in the spiritual world there are hours when prayer carries exponentially amplified authority. In the kingdom of darkness, we operated according to strict spiritual timetables. We had specific hours reserved for our most powerful rituals. We had appointed moments when our forces gathered for coordinated assignments. There were windows in the day and deep in the night when demonic activity in the unseen realm crested to its peak. And we were equally aware that certain hours existed in which believers, if they chose to pray, could obliterate everything we were building. That is precisely why one of our primary strategies was to ensure that the faithful never discovered these 3 windows. We manufactured distractions. We dispatched spirits of deep sleep. We generated crises and emergencies designed to leave people too exhausted or too overwhelmed to approach those hours in prayer. Because we knew that if believers ever uncovered the power embedded in these 3 specific times and began using them with consistency, our entire network of operations would collapse. Let me take you back to how I first came to understand the first critical prayer time. When I was initiated into the coven, the elders made one thing unmistakably clear from the start. The most dangerous hour for our operations was the early morning, specifically the span between 4 and 6 in the morning. We called it the hour of divine visitation, and we were taught that if we could succeed in keeping believers asleep during those hours, we could govern the trajectory of the rest of their day. I did not fully grasp why this window carried such power until I was assigned to monitor a pastor in Mombasa named Pastor Dowdy. He was not well known. His congregation numbered perhaps 100 souls. But something about this man unsettled the entire coven. People who walked through the doors of his church were being genuinely freed. Marriages that had crumbled were being restored. Businesses were recovering and prospering. Young men and women who had been entangled in occult practices were leaving that life entirely and surrendering themselves to the divine. We needed to stop him. So I was deployed into the spirit realm to observe him, to find his weakness, the crack in his armor through which we could strike and dismantle everything he had built. I watched him for weeks. I studied his schedule with meticulous attention. I noted when he prayed, when he fasted, when he sat with sacred writings, and what I found stopped me cold. Every single morning, without exception, Pastor Dowdy woke at 4:30. And before he did anything else, before he reached for his phone, before he spoke a word to anyone, before he even switched on the light, he would lower himself to his knees beside his bed and begin to pray. Let me walk you through what I observed during those weeks of surveillance, because the details matter deeply. The first thing that struck me was his relentless consistency. It made no difference if he had returned home late the previous night. It made no difference if fatigue clung to him or if he was unwell. It did not matter whether it was a weekday or a weekend. Every morning at 4:30 he was on his knees. I watched him on a Monday following a Sunday night of late ministry. He had gone to bed at 1 in the morning, barely 3.5 hours before his alarm sounded. I thought, surely today he will sleep through. Surely today will be the exception. But at 4:30 exactly, his alarm rang, and within 2 minutes he was on the floor in prayer. I watched him on the morning when one of his children had fallen ill. His wife had been up most of the night at the child's side, and he had helped her until they finally got the little one settled around 3 in the morning. I thought, surely today he will rest. But at 4:30 he rose and prayed. And in those first moments, the very first thing he did was cover his sick child, declaring that every sickness had to release its hold. I watched him on the morning before a meeting that carried enormous weight for the future of his ministry. I thought, surely today he will use these hours to prepare his strategy, to review his position, to rehearse what he would say. But at 4:30 he was on his knees, and for the first 20 minutes he said nothing at all, simply resting in the presence of the divine, listening, waiting. And when he finally began to speak, it was with a clarity and a sharpness of direction that told me heaven itself had downloaded the entire strategy for that meeting into him during those silent minutes. The prayers he offered in those early morning hours were different from anything he prayed at any other time. There was a freshness to them, an intimacy, a weight of power that felt unlike anything I had encountered. It was as though he was standing face to face with the divine, receiving plans and wisdom poured directly into him. I attempted every disruption available to me. I released spirits of deep sleep to drag him back under. I stirred disturbances within his household to fracture his rhythm. I sent forces of distraction to scatter his focus during prayer itself. Nothing penetrated. It was as if an unseen wall of sacred fire surrounded him during those early morning hours, a perimeter I could not cross. And then I began to track the pattern. Whatever Pastor Dowdy prayed for in the early morning manifested before the day was through. If he covered someone's healing in those hours, that person would appear at the evening gathering with a testimony of restoration. If he prayed for provision to enter the ministry, a call would come before noon with an offering. If he called protection over his family at 4:30, every attack we launched against that household throughout the day would fail without explanation. It was as though the early morning prayers cast a spiritual blueprint over the entire day, and heaven moved in alignment with every word spoken in those hours. When I reported this to my coven leader, she was not surprised. She said to me, "The early morning is the hour when the sacred realm is most attuned to the prayers of the faithful. This is precisely why we work so relentlessly to keep them sleeping during those hours." A believer who learns to pray in the early morning becomes untouchable for the remainder of the day. That is the first critical prayer time. The early morning, specifically between 4 and 6, before the sun has risen. This is the hour when the divine visits those who are waiting. This is the window when the sacred realm is most responsive. This is when you receive direction, download strategy, and set the spiritual atmosphere for everything that follows. Let me tell you why this time carries such weight from a scriptural perspective. Throughout ancient sacred writings, we see the pattern repeated. The divine meets with people in the early morning. Moses ascended the mountain in the early hours to meet with the Eternal. The great teacher in his earthly ministry rose very early while it was still dark to find a solitary place and commune in prayer. The ancient poet David wrote, "In the morning I lay my request before you and wait with expectation." The early morning is when your mind is uncluttered. The weight of the day has not yet pressed in. Distractions have not yet begun their assault. The noise of the world is still quiet. And in that stillness, the divine speaks with the greatest clarity. But there is something more, something operating at the level of the spirit realm itself. The early morning is precisely when demonic assignments for the day are being planned and deployed. It is the hour when the enemy is organizing, coordinating, positioning forces for the strikes he intends to launch. When you pray in those early hours, you are intercepting those plans before they can be set in motion. You are dismantling assignments before they can be activated. You are placing a sacred covering over your day that demonic forces cannot break through. I remember a woman in Mombasa named Sister Zawadi, a businesswoman who operated a small shop in the market. Our coven had targeted her because she had refused to participate in the occult practices that were common among traders in that area. We cursed her business. We dispatched spirits to repel her customers. We sowed confusion and loss into her operations. But Sister Zawadi rose every morning at 5 and she prayed. She covered her business, her customers, her livelihood. She declared sacred words over her shop and petitioned the divine to prosper the work of her hands. And regardless of what we unleashed, her trade continued to grow. Customers we tried to divert ended up at her stall anyway. Goods we tried to spoil remained sound. Revenue we tried to block arrived through unexpected channels. After 6 months of failure, my coven leader told me plainly, "Stop wasting resources on that woman. She prays in the early morning. As long as she holds that discipline, we cannot touch her business. Her day is sealed before our operations can even begin." That is the power of early morning prayer. It seals your day. It sets the spiritual atmosphere. It downloads heaven's agenda before the enemy can impose his own. Now let me tell you about the second critical prayer time. And this one is perhaps the most powerful of all three. It is midnight prayer. In the kingdom of darkness, midnight belongs to us. It is when our coven gatherings happen. It is when our most potent rituals are performed. It is when demonic activity in the unseen realm peaks at its absolute highest. The reason is straightforward. Midnight is the hour when most believers are asleep. Their spiritual guard is down. We can operate with minimal resistance. But there were some believers who understood the spiritual weight of midnight, and they would set themselves to rise specifically at that hour and pray. These were the most formidable threats to everything we tried to do. Let me explain why midnight prayer is so devastating to the kingdom of darkness. When a believer prays at midnight, they are not simply praying at an inconvenient hour. They are invading our time. They are appearing in the spirit realm at the precise moment when demonic operations are at their most active, and their presence, their declarations, their intercessions scatter everything we are building. It is like flooding a darkened room with light. The darkness cannot function. I remember a family in Mombasa that our entire coven had been assigned to destroy. The husband worked as a civil servant. His wife taught school. They had 3 children and a quiet life. The assignment came because the husband had exposed corruption in his workplace, and those involved had deep ties to our network. We initiated the standard sequence of attack, releasing sickness over the children, manufacturing financial pressure, planting misunderstanding in the marriage. For a few weeks, it appeared our strategy was gaining ground. The children were falling ill repeatedly. The husband lost his position. The wife was stretched past her limit. Then something changed. The couple began rising together at midnight to pray. I do not know what led them to this decision, but they committed to waking every night at 12 and interceding together for 1 hour. From the moment they began, everything in the spirit realm shifted. The first night they prayed at midnight, I was present in the spirit realm observing their home. When they rose and opened their mouths, it was as if a detonation went off in the spiritual atmosphere. The demonic forces we had stationed around their household were instantly displaced. The curses we had pronounced were severed. The assignments we had arranged were reduced to nothing. I attempted to regroup and send replacements, but they could not enter the space where that couple was praying. It was as though a wall of sacred fire surrounded the property, a barrier nothing could breach. By the second night, my coven leader had called an emergency meeting. She was furious. She demanded to know who had informed them about midnight prayer. She instructed us to release our most powerful spirits to assault them, to press such overwhelming fatigue on them that they would never rise again, to manufacture emergencies that would shatter their routine. Nothing worked. This couple had made a decision at the level of their will that nothing would prevent them from praying at midnight. On the third night, we saturated them with extreme physical exhaustion. We pressed on them so heavily during the day that by bedtime they could barely hold their eyes open. When the alarm sounded at midnight, the wife woke but could not rouse her husband. He had fallen into the kind of sleep that feels like going under. Most people would have let him rest and returned to bed themselves. Instead, she retrieved a damp cloth, pressed it to his face, and said, "My love, we made a commitment. We are praying tonight." Within 5 minutes, they were both on their knees. On the 5th night, we engineered a crisis. Their youngest child woke at 11:45 with sharp stomach pain. The parents attended to him, gave him what was needed, settled him back to sleep. By then it was 12:30. Most people would have reasoned, we missed our midnight window tomorrow. But they said it doesn't matter. It is still the middle of the night and we are still going to pray. They interceded from 12:30 until 1:30 in the morning. On the seventh night, we shifted approaches and sent spirits of doubt, quiet whispers in the mind. This is changing nothing. You are losing sleep for nothing. Look around you. Nothing is better. When the alarm went off, the husband said to his wife, maybe we should stop. I don't see anything shifting. His wife looked at him steadily and said, we are not walking by what we see. We are walking by what we believe. And I believe these prayers are working in the spirit realm right now, even if we cannot see it yet. Let us pray. On the 10th night, we attempted to fracture the relationship itself. We seeded a misunderstanding earlier in the evening that escalated into a real dispute. They went to bed without speaking. I thought, surely tonight there is no prayer. How can two people at odds with each other enter into unity in intercession? But at midnight, when the alarm rang, the wife rose first. She walked to her husband's side of the bed, rested her hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, I'm sorry. Can we please pray together? He answered, I'm sorry too. Yes, let us pray. 2 minutes to reconcile. 1 hour of prayer that followed. That was the moment I understood we were dealing with a quality of commitment we simply could not break. Within 1 month, the husband received a position better than the one he had lost. The children's health was fully restored. The marriage grew stronger than it had been before. Every single thing we had done to pull that family apart was completely undone. That is the power of midnight prayer. The sacred writings speak of a man who went to his neighbor's house at midnight asking for bread. And because of the man's relentless persistence, the neighbor rose and gave him what he needed. Persistence at an unusual hour. Midnight is not a comfortable time to pray. It requires sacrifice. It requires you to interrupt your sleep, your comfort, your rest. But it is that very sacrifice, that willingness to show up in prayer when it costs you something, that releases extraordinary power. In the ancient book of Acts, 2 men named Paul and Silas prayed at midnight while confined in a prison. Their prayers produced an earthquake that shook the foundations and opened every door. That is what midnight prayer does. It shakes foundations, it breaks chains, it opens doors that appear permanently sealed. Let me tell you about a young man I know from Nairobi who understood this. He had spent several years at university deeply enmeshed in a secret society. He had taken oaths sealed in blood. He had participated in rituals. He had given away portions of himself to the kingdom of darkness. And even after he turned away from all of it and surrendered his life to the divine, the attacks continued. Nightmares, oppression, spiritual heaviness that would not lift. He sought help from multiple spiritual leaders. He would receive temporary relief, but the darkness would return. He fasted. He prayed during daylight hours. He immersed himself in sacred writings. Nothing seemed to produce lasting freedom. Then an older believer told him something that changed everything. He said, brother, the spirits assigned to you are most active at night. You need to confront them at midnight, in their hour, at their time, and enforce the victory of the sacred over your life in that very window. He began rising at midnight to pray, and the first week was brutal. He would feel the weight of oppression the moment he woke. Sometimes he would see dark shapes in the room, terrifying things. But he forced himself to open his mouth and declare sacred truth over himself. He commanded every demonic spirit to leave. I was among the forces assigned to his case, and I can tell you with certainty that his midnight prayers were catastrophic to our operations. Each night he prayed, our grip on him weakened further. The legal standing we had been using to access him was being dismantled piece by piece. The covenants he had entered into in the secret society were being broken apart one by one. During the first week, the attacks were fierce. The first night, a crushing weight settled on his chest when he woke. We were trying to overwhelm him so completely that fear alone would silence him. But he spoke aloud, by the sacred power of the divine, every oppressing spirit leaves me now. And immediately the weight lifted. The second night he saw shadows in his room, manifestations of the spirits assigned to him. Most people would have fled. He turned on his light, opened the ancient writings to the 91st chapter, and began to read it aloud. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall rest in the shadow of the Almighty. As the words left his mouth, the shadows dissolved. The third night, voices whispered his name, trying to pull him back, to remind him of the oaths he had taken. He covered his ears and began to sing. As he sang, the voices stopped. By the end of the first week, the intensity of the attacks had diminished substantially. We were losing ground every night. During the second week, his dream life began to change. Before midnight prayer, his nights were filled with nightmares, with vivid images from his time in the secret society. But now his dreams shifted. He was winning battles, operating in authority, walking in freedom. The spiritual atmosphere around him was being transformed. During the third week, changes appeared in his physical body. His eyes, which had long carried the look of exhaustion and hidden trouble, became clear and steady. His face, which had worn a constant expression of anxiety, became peaceful. The freedom he was gaining in the spirit realm was showing up in his body. During the fourth week, the final strongholds gave way. The nightmares ended. The oppression lifted. The fear dissolved. And during his midnight prayer one night, he received a vision. He saw a luminous figure standing in the room with him. The figure said, "You are completely free. Every chain is severed. Every covenant is destroyed. You belong to the divine, and no one can remove you from that place." After 30 days of faithful midnight prayer, he was free, permanently. The attacks never returned because he had learned to confront darkness on its own ground. Now let me tell you about the third critical prayer time. This one is anchored in a specific moment in history that carries spiritual authority unlike any other hour of the day. It is 3 in the afternoon. 3 in the afternoon is the hour when the greatest act of sacred sacrifice in history was completed, the moment when the voice of one who bore all suffering cried out, "It is finished," and surrendered life itself. Because of what occurred at that moment, 3 in the afternoon carries a spiritual authority that no other time of day can match. In the kingdom of darkness, we were taught to avoid believers who prayed at 3 in the afternoon. We were told this was the hour of divine mercy, the hour when the voice of sacred blood speaks at its loudest, when the gates of heaven stand most open to the cries of those who call out with faith. Let me tell you what I personally observed regarding 3 o'clock prayer. There was a man in Mombasa named Pastor Samuel, an elderly man probably in his 70s, who ran a small prayer ministry without a building or a large following. But people came to him from all across the coast asking for intercession, and when he prayed, things happened. Illnesses healed, demonic oppression broke, financial breakthroughs came. Our coven wanted to understand the source of his effectiveness. I was sent to observe him. What I found was that Pastor Samuel had made a daily, unbreakable commitment to pray specifically at 3 in the afternoon, without fail. At 3 o'clock, he would stop whatever he was engaged in, go to his prayer room and spend at least 30 minutes in intercession. And the prayers he offered at 3 were focused entirely on the finished work of the sacred sacrifice. He would honor what was accomplished through that act. He would apply the power of sacred blood over specific situations. He would declare that because of what was accomplished in that hour 2,000 years ago, every curse was broken, every chain was destroyed, every debt was cancelled. The spiritual power released during those 3 o'clock prayers was unlike anything I had witnessed. It was as if all of the sacred realm was in agreement with his every word. I tried repeatedly to obstruct those prayers, to create distractions, to make him forget the hour, to fill his schedule so completely that 3 o'clock would pass unnoticed. It never worked. This man was so disciplined, so committed to that hour, that nothing moved him from it, and the results were undeniable. People who arrived bound by witchcraft walked away free after one prayer. People who had struggled with sickness for years were instantly healed. People living under financial curses experienced breakthroughs within days. When I asked my coven leader why the 3 o'clock hour carried such power, she gave me an answer I have never forgotten. She said, at 3 in the afternoon, the entire sacred realm remembers what was accomplished on the cross. When a believer prays in that hour, they are praying in alignment with the greatest demonstration of power ever witnessed. The voice of sacred blood speaks at 3 o'clock, and we have no answer for it. That is the power of 3 o'clock prayer. It is praying in alignment with the greatest sacrifice ever made. It is praying under the authority of the blood. It is praying in the hour when divine mercy is most abundantly available. In many ancient traditions, it is called the hour of mercy, and I can confirm from my years inside the kingdom of darkness that this is absolutely true. At 3 o'clock, mercy overrides judgment. At 3 o'clock, the voice of sacred blood speaks on your behalf. At 3 o'clock, what seems impossible becomes possible. Let me give you one more example. There was a woman in Mombasa named Mama Furaha, whose son had been enslaved by drug addiction for years. This young man had cycled through rehabilitation centers multiple times. He had taken from his own family. He had destroyed relationships. He was walking toward death. Nothing seemed able to alter the trajectory. Mama Furaha had prayed for her son for years. She had fasted, she had wept, she had brought him before spiritual leaders. Nothing changed. Hope was beginning to thin in her heart. Then someone told her about the power of praying specifically at 3 in the afternoon and instructed her to focus those prayers on the authority of sacred blood applied over her son's life. She began setting an alarm for 3 o'clock every afternoon. When it sounded, regardless of where she was or what she was doing, she would stop and pray. She would say, "By the authority of the sacred blood poured out at this hour, I cover my son. Every chain of addiction is broken. Every demonic influence is severed. Every curse over his life is reversed. You gave everything at this hour, and I claim that victory over my son's life right now." She prayed this every day at 3 o'clock for 3 months. I was among the spirits assigned to hold her son in bondage, and I can tell you that those prayers were destroying our grip on him with every passing day. At 3 o'clock each afternoon, I would feel the power of that sacred authority breaking the chains we had wrapped around him. The legal standing we were using to keep him bound was being removed piece by piece. During the first month, nothing in the natural world appeared to change. Her son was still using, still taking things that were not his, still lying. But what Mama Furaha could not see was that in the spirit realm, every afternoon at 3, the chains holding him were becoming weaker. Our demonic council met repeatedly to discuss this case. Every day at 3 o'clock we lost more ground, and we could not understand why her prayers were so effective against us. Finally, one of the senior demons said, "She is praying in the hour when the sacred authority speaks. We have no defense in that hour. Our only option is to discourage her enough that she gives up before the breakthrough comes." So in the second month, we shifted our energy toward Mama Furaha herself. We released spirits of discouragement. We made her doubt whether anything was happening. We influenced people around her to say things like, "Your son is beyond saving. Accept that this is how his life ends." We even tried to make her physically ill enough that she would be too weakened to stand at 3 o'clock. But she refused to stop. There were afternoons when she prayed through tears of grief, days when discouragement sat on her like a stone. But she never missed the hour. And every day at 3 she said the same thing. "By sacred authority my son is free. I do not care what I see. I do not care what anyone says. I believe this authority is more powerful than any addiction." In the third month we knew we had lost. The legal standing holding her son was gone entirely. The chains were severed. All that remained was for him to step into the freedom already won in the spirit realm. And then one afternoon, at precisely 3 o'clock, her son was at a friend's home about to use drugs. Something stopped his hand. He later described it as a physical force that he could not explain. He could not put the substance to his mouth. In that moment, he broke down weeping and said, "I need help." From that evening, he went home and told his mother he was ready to enter a faith-based recovery program. He never returned to drugs. He is today a leader, helping others walk out of the same chains that once held him. That is the power of 3 o'clock prayer. Now let me tell you what happens when a believer combines all 3 prayer times. When someone prays in the early morning, at midnight, and at 3 in the afternoon, they become a force in the spirit realm that the kingdom of darkness has absolutely no answer for. There was a pastor in Mombasa named Pastor Emmanuel in his early 40s who had planted a church in a neighborhood well known for occult activity. Many of the prominent families in that area were embedded in traditional witchcraft and marine spiritual practices. When he began preaching the good news there, our entire network mobilized to destroy him. We attacked his health, we attacked his family, we seeded conflicts into his congregation. We worked relentlessly to discourage him until he would abandon that territory. For the first year it appeared we were succeeding. The church was not growing. He was fighting one problem after another. He was exhausted, disheartened, and close to walking away. Then Pastor Emmanuel attended a gathering where a minister spoke about the power of strategic prayer times, specifically the early morning, midnight, and 3 in the afternoon. He made a decision. He committed to praying faithfully at all 3 times every day for 90 days. And he did not approach these times casually. In the early morning, he prayed for direction and strategy over his ministry. At midnight, he engaged in direct spiritual warfare, confronting and binding every demonic force operating in that neighborhood. At 3 in the afternoon, he prayed prayers of mercy, petitioning the divine to save souls and break oppression across the community. The transformation was extraordinary. In the first month of praying at these 3 times, I watched as our covenant's influence over that neighborhood began to unravel. The spirits we had positioned to block his ministry could no longer function. The curses we had pronounced were being dismantled. The people we had turned against him began to soften. In the second month, people from the neighborhood began to come to his church. And not just any people, people who had been deeply embedded in occult practice, coming in, hearing the message, being genuinely freed and transformed. In the third month, our coven held an emergency assembly because we had lost control of that neighborhood entirely. Our strongholds were being demolished. Our altars were being torn down. People who used to come to us for power were now finding their way to Pastor Emmanuel's gathering, and there was nothing we could do to stop it. By the end of 90 days, his congregation had grown from 15 people to over 200. The spiritual atmosphere across that entire neighborhood had shifted. Where darkness, oppression, and fear had lived, there was now light, freedom, and something I had never observed from my position in the darkness: genuine joy. This is what happens when you pray at these 3 strategic times. You set the spiritual atmosphere for your day in the early morning. You confront and dismantle enemy operations at midnight. You release mercy and sacred authority at 3 in the afternoon. When you do this consistently, you become an unstoppable force. Now I know the thought forming in your mind. You are thinking, how can I possibly wake at 4 in the morning, stay awake until midnight, and also stop at 3 in the afternoon? Every single day. I have responsibilities. I have work. I have a life. I understand. But hear this clearly. You do not need to spend hours at each of these times. Even 15 minutes of focused, intentional prayer at the right time carries more power than hours of scattered prayer at the wrong time. The power is not in the length. The power is in the timing and the intentionality. If you can only begin with one of these times, start with the early morning. Wake 30 minutes earlier than usual. Use that time in prayer. Set the spiritual atmosphere for your day before the enemy can establish his agenda. Once that becomes a discipline, add the 3 o'clock. Set an alarm. When it sounds, step away for 10 or 15 minutes. Cover your life and your loved ones with the authority of the sacred hour. Once both of those are established, add the midnight. You do not have to do it every night. Begin with 1 night per week. Set your alarm, pray for 30 minutes. As the discipline grows, increase the frequency. The key is to begin. The key is consistency. The key is faith and intentionality at these strategic windows. Let me share with you what unfolded in my own life after I turned away from the kingdom of darkness and was set free. One of the first things I did was find Pastor Dowdy, the man whose early morning prayers I had worked so hard to interrupt all those years ago. I told him my story. I told him I had been an operative assigned to monitor him. And I told him that his early morning prayers were the reason every attack I launched against him failed. He looked at me with extraordinary kindness and said, "Sister, I am not surprised. The early morning has been my greatest weapon for over 20 years. And now that you are free, I want to teach you to use it." He sat with me and taught me about the 3 strategic prayer times. I began to implement them in my own life. And I can tell you from my own experience now that my life has been transformed by these 3 hours. The early morning grounds me. It gives me direction and clarity before anything else has a chance to speak into my day. The midnight prayer keeps me sharp and vigilant, reminding me that the battle in the spirit realm is real and that I carry both the authority and the responsibility to stand in it. The 3 o'clock fills me with gratitude and sacred power. Every time I pray at that hour, I am reminded of what was sacrificed for me, and I am overwhelmed by love and victory. And now I want to activate these 3 prayer times over your life. Right where you are, I want you to pray with me. Speak this out loud, because when you declare it with your voice, you are making a decree in the spirit realm. Say this with me. Father of all creation, eternal and divine, I come before you in this moment. I thank you for opening my eyes to the 3 strategic prayer times that destroy every demonic assignment against my life. I thank you that these times are not a burden, but a divine appointment, a place where I can meet with you and access your power. Right now, I commit to praying in the early morning. Sacred Spirit, help me to rise. Give me the discipline to leave my bed even when fatigue pulls at me. Help me to place this time above everything else. And when I pray in the early morning, let my prayer seal the atmosphere for my entire day. Wisdom and direction. Let me close every door before the enemy can enter. I also commit to praying at midnight. Grant me the grace to rise at that hour and intercept the plans of darkness. Help me to confront the unseen realm at its most active moment. Help me to destroy assignments before they can be carried out. And when I pray at midnight, let my prayers shake the foundations of every demonic operation against my life, my family, and my community. And I commit to praying at 3 in the afternoon. Let this be my sacred hour of mercy. Let this be the time when I apply the authority of the divine over every situation. Let this be the moment when I remember the great sacrifice made for me and enforce that victory over my life. I ask for supernatural strength to maintain these 3 times. When I am weary, energize me. When I am discouraged, bring back the memory of what these hours carry. When distraction comes, refocus me. Let these 3 prayer times become non-negotiable in my daily life. And as I pray at these times, let my prayers function as spiritual weapons that destroy every witchcraft assignment against my life. Let every curse be broken. Let every monitoring spirit lose sight of me. Let every evil altar erected against me crumble. Let every plan of darkness be frustrated before it can reach me. I declare that because I pray in the early morning, my day is sealed in sacred presence, and no weapon formed against me shall succeed. I declare that because I pray at midnight, I confront darkness on its own ground and enforce the victory of the divine over every demonic operation. I declare that because I pray at 3 in the afternoon, I carry the authority of the sacred hour, and every impossible situation must bow before the finished work. From this day forward, I am a believer who prays at strategic times. I am someone who understands spiritual timing. I am an intercessor who knows when to strike. And because of that, every demonic assignment against my life is destroyed. Every plan of the enemy is frustrated. Every curse is broken. Every monitoring spirit is blinded. Every evil altar crumbles to the ground. I am covered by the authority of the divine. I am backed by the power of heaven. I am empowered by the sacred spirit. And my prayers at these 3 times are dismantling every work of darkness in the mighty, all-conquering name of the Eternal. Amen. If you prayed that prayer with me, something has already shifted in the spirit realm. You have activated the 3 strategic prayer times over your life. As you begin to pray at these times consistently, you are going to witness breakthroughs unlike anything you have experienced before. But understand this is not a formula. These prayer times are not about ritual performance. They are about being intentional, being disciplined, and meeting with the divine at the hours when heaven is most responsive and darkness is most vulnerable. Let me give you practical steps for each time. For the early morning, set your alarm 30 minutes earlier than usual. Place it across the room so you must physically get up to silence it. When you rise, do not reach for your phone. Do not turn on the television. Go directly to your place of prayer and begin. Pray for direction, pray for protection, pray for your responsibilities. Declare sacred truth over your life. Do this consistently for at least 30 days until the habit is built. For 3 in the afternoon, set an alarm. When it sounds, wherever you are, find a private moment if you can, your car, an empty room, a quiet corner, and pray for 10 to 15 minutes. Focus on the authority of the sacred hour. Thank the divine for what was accomplished. Apply that authority over your life, your family, your circumstances. Declare that because of the sacrifice, every curse is broken, every chain is destroyed, every debt is cancelled. For the midnight prayer, begin with 1 night a week. Set your alarm for 11:45 so you can wake, wash your face, and be fully alert by midnight. Engage in direct spiritual warfare. Bind every demonic operation against your life. Command every monitoring spirit to leave. Break every evil covenant. Dismantle every witchcraft assignment. Enforce the victory of the divine. Pray for 30 minutes. As the discipline grows, increase the frequency. 2 nights, 3, eventually every night if you are led there. Build slowly and build with consistency. Do not attempt to implement all 3 times perfectly from day 1. Start with the early morning. Once it is a habit, add the 3 o'clock. Once both are stable, add midnight. And when discouragement comes, when you feel tired, when you feel like stopping, bring back these stories. Remember Pastor Dowdy, whose early morning prayers made him untouchable. Remember the couple whose midnight intercession destroyed our entire assignment. Remember Mama Furaha, whose 3 o'clock prayers freed her son from what everyone said was hopeless. These prayer times are real. They work. Let me also tell you about the common obstacles and how to defeat them. The first obstacle is fatigue. The enemy will press extreme tiredness on you to keep you from rising for early morning or midnight prayer. Counter this by sleeping earlier. If you need to be up at 4:30, stop scrolling and go to bed by 10. And when you are still tired, in spite of that, petition the divine for supernatural strength. I have seen the sacred realm energize people who had barely slept when their commitment to these times was genuine. The second obstacle is a full schedule. The enemy will pack your days so tightly that 3 o'clock slips past every time. Counter this by treating your 3 o'clock prayer like a fixed appointment. Put it in your calendar, make it non-negotiable, and remember, 10 minutes of focused prayer at the right hour is more powerful than you can imagine. You can find 10 minutes. The third obstacle is discouragement. Especially in the early weeks, the enemy will whisper, "Nothing is changing. You are wasting your time." Counter this by anchoring yourself in the truth that spiritual breakthrough always precedes what is visible in the natural. The results in the spirit realm arrive before you see them with your eyes. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. Keep going. The fourth obstacle is inconsistency. The enemy will get you to miss one day, then 2, then a week, until the habit is gone entirely. Counter this by making a specific commitment, 30 days no matter what. And if you miss a day, do not allow condemnation to stop you. Simply return the next day. Progress matters more than perfection. Before I close, I am asking you to do something. If this message has opened your eyes to the reality of these prayer times, if something has been deposited in you today that you did not carry before, share this. Share it with people who love you. Share it with your family, your friends, your community of faith. There are countless believers who are praying faithfully but seeing little fruit, simply because they do not know about the power of strategic timing. You can be the one to bring this understanding to them. You can be the one to show them when to pray for maximum impact. By sharing this message, you are not passing on information. You are equipping the community of faith to pray with authority. You are helping to build an army of believers who understand when to strike in the spirit realm. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, please do that now. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, because I am going to continue bringing you this kind of revelation. I am going to continue drawing back the curtain on the strategies of the kingdom of darkness. I am going to continue teaching you how to pray with power, with precision, and with results. This is not just a channel. This is a training ground for those who are serious about walking in spiritual authority. This is a place where the faithful come to learn how to fight and win in the unseen realm. Let me know in the comments, which of these 3 times are you committing to first? Tell me what the divine is showing you. Because your testimony may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Your commitment may light a fire in someone who is about to give up. Your breakthrough may be the evidence that gives someone else the courage to begin. We are in this together. We are the community of the divine. And when we learn to pray at the right times, when we understand spiritual timing, when we strike at the moments when heaven is most responsive and darkness most vulnerable, we become a force that nothing in the unseen realm can resist. I am Nadia Wambura. I was once an operative in the kingdom of darkness, assigned to monitor and block the prayers of believers. But the divine set me free. And now I teach the faithful when to pray, so that their prayers can never be blocked again. These 3 prayer times are real. They are powerful. They work. Pray in the early morning to set the atmosphere for your day. Pray at midnight to confront darkness at its own hour. Pray at 3 in the afternoon to release the authority of the sacred hour over your life. Do these 3 things with consistency and faith, and you will witness breakthroughs you have never seen before. Your prayers will destroy every demonic assignment. Your prayers will shake the foundations of darkness. Your prayers will release the power of heaven into the earth. And let me leave you with this final word of encouragement. You are not alone in this. There are believers all over the world discovering these prayer times and experiencing transformation. You are joining a global company of intercessors who understand spiritual timing. And together we are not simply sending up scattered prayers at random hours. We are striking precisely at the exact moments when our prayers carry the greatest force. The kingdom of darkness is terrified of believers who understand timing. They fear those who pray in the early morning, at midnight, and at 3 in the afternoon, because they know that when believers pray at these hours, they become unstoppable. Make the commitment, set your alarms, build the discipline, and watch what the divine will do in your life as you step into these 3 strategic hours. May the Eternal bless you and grant you the discipline to pray at these times. May you be empowered to become a warrior who knows when to strike. And may your prayers become an unstoppable force, destroying every work of darkness and establishing the kingdom of the divine in all its fullness. Amen.